National Foundation for Educational Research Director and co-author of the report. Jenna Julius joins us to tell us a bit more about this. Jenna, good morning. What does it mean to have a deficit budget for a school?
Good morning, Charlie. So, a budget deficit, as you expect, is where a school's expenditure exceeds the income that it has coming in. And the consequence of the in-year deficits that you were just referring to is that schools are having to make these really difficult cuts. So as you said, about 3/5 of primary schools report cutting spending on the learning resources available to pupils. That's things like library books, materials for arts and science, really basic things that schools need for learning. Almost half of primary schools and about a third of special and secondary schools are also telling us that they're having to cut their number of teaching assistants or hours. And we know that teaching assistants play a really important role in supporting pupils, particularly those with special educational needs and disabilities. So the consequence of this, the consequences of schools having these financial pressures, is that teachers and senior leaders are telling us that their teaching and learning provision is being negatively impacted. Almost half of the senior leaders who responded to our survey told us that their quality of teaching and learning in their school was being negatively affected by cost of living pressures.
So to be clear, this is to do with day-to-day spending, as you mentioned, a lot of sort of materials, resources, even human resources there, talking about teaching assistants, rather than things like school building projects.
So it's all of that,
right.
Charlie. Not just it's day-to-day spending that schools are making, but they're also making cuts. So to building projects, so around half of school leaders told us they were cutting building and maintenance spending as a result of cost of living pressures. It's also things you might class in the which are really important, but you might class in the more nice to have category, like extracurricular activities. But the fact is that schools are beyond the point really of the nice to haves and having to cut those. They're having to cut their core sort of bread and butter in order to make ends meet, which is obviously really concerning, as without urgent action now, the risk is that these cost of living pressures that schools are facing, alongside the myriad of other challenges that they've faced over recent years, risks having these really far-reaching and long-lasting impacts on pupils.
Well, I want to ask about that. So what impact do you think, from your research, what is the impact on students and pupils?
Thanks, Charlie. Well, the reality is where schools are having to cut provision and it's affecting teaching quality, that's going to have a real impact on young people's life chances, the opportunities that they might see. And we know that there's already a large gap in the outcomes between pupils from different backgrounds, and that gap is only likely to widen. The other really concerning picture that's coming from our research is that pupils, in particular with additional needs, aren't having, schools are really concerned that they're not able to meet these needs, and that reflects the cuts that are being made. We also know that, for example, in special schools are having to cut core parts of their specialist support offer, things like physiotherapy, hydrotherapy, and these activities are really important, not just from an academic perspective, but also for ensuring that their pupils are able to gain independence, and will affect them, for the rest of their lives. So these are really important things that are not just going to be affecting young people today, but are going to have impacts for decades to come if we don't act now.
Jenna, thank you very much for explaining that to us. National Foundation for Educational Research Director there, Jenna Julius, speaking to us this morning.